First thing that comes to my mind is when we came down in the morning on the farm, the kitchen door was always open. And my mum taught me the gift of nature, which is an incredible gift because it's free and not everybody's sensitive to it. One of the ways she taught us was before we allowed breakfast, she'd always say, she's very posh, and said, darling, go outside and smell the morning first. So we always had to go out the kitchen door, even if we were grumpy, didn't want to, walk 3 times around what we call the clean yard, because the rest of the farm was all muddy yard. And actually, it was a real blessing. And I kind of got it after a while, but there's something out there that's really wonderful. So there's that. Second thing that comes to mind is Munt Beach, which was always empty, because I'm old, and this was in the 50s. And when we went down there, we had the whole place to ourselves, nearly always. We felt really pissed off if there were other people on the beach. People didn't go to the beach. They were too busy farming. So I learned to love the sea. And my mum bought us snorkels and masks and stuff so we could see underwater. Except the day she bought us 2 plastic blow-up porpoises. And one for me and one for my brother. Remember, they were bright red. And she wasn't looking because we were in the sea at Poppet, down by the rocks towards Kaibach. And the wind took the porpoises. We were about half a mile out before she noticed. I nearly died. I remember Mark and my brother saying, "Bro, I'm panicking. I can still remember it. 1953 or 1954.
How did you get back?
I think she swam out. She's pretty
Did she?
She'd been busy reading or something, and we just gone. We didn't even notice till we couldn't get our feet down.
Mm.
Pop it. You weren't expecting me to hold this up. This is not planned, but this is off the beach. That's a bit of wood off the beach. That's a bit of hawthorn. That's a bit off the beach. And the tin is from Greece. So that doesn't count. I don't know. I mean, that's not quite right. Pembroke's is such a weird place because there's so much going on in the ether here, you know. I think my answer to that is I think it works. I think Pembrokeshire works at a very subliminal level. I've only been back for a couple of years, and I'm still kind of getting the feel of the materials and wondering about them. Because, you know, like birdsong, which I adore, is a kind of material, it's kind of the substance of the place. But there's I'm sure that's why the Stonehenge people while there was all that stuff going on, they chose stone. But what it was is there's so much coming out the ground here that it's a kind of psychically really busy place. A bit too much at times, but it's certainly influencing my music making. And I think that I'm beginning to go back to where I started with music, which is making musical landscapes. What if I can do one?
Oh yeah, go on.
Well, it would be improvised.
To do with...
What can we do?
There's a few birds joining in too. Distinctly heard a robin then as well.
Yeah.
And the dunnock.
Yeah.
Oh, and the rooks, they're nesting. Busy time.
They're really busy. I was watching them through the binoculars yesterday in the studio. Got binoculars, and I just put them on a stand to look at the nesting. It was really interesting because I thought the rooks just made their own nest, my nest. They help each other. I was watching this rook going and helping, definitely helping. And then what was strange is getting involved in 2 or 3 nests and then taking a stick of one nest, out of one nest, and taking it to another one, which was like, I don't know if that was thinking that nest needs this particular stick or whether it was giving a little bit of preference to another. It was really lovely. And then there's a point where there was 2 rooks. They're so beautiful. This time of the year, I don't know if it's the time of the year, but it's the back of the beak where it meets the head is white, It's black at the front and it goes white and then it goes black. And there were these 2 rooks in their nest, and they just had their heads next to each other, and they were just sitting there still for about 5 minutes, completely still, with their heads, kind of touching each other. Pretty cute. Is that I was sent away from West Wales, and that was a kind of catastrophe in my life. When I was 7, I was put in care, which is the culture of my family. They call it boarding school, but it's a polite word for upper class care. And I was sent from the farm in Cardigan all the way to the south coast of England, and it was a sodding nightmare. I was 7 years old, never been out in the world, and it was a nightmare. And that set a pattern really for my life of always being sent away from here. So I was sent to this school and then to that school, and then when I was 18, I was sent to boarding school. Sorry, not boarding school, I've done that bit. My brain. When I was 18, I came from boarding school and was sent to Australia, and then I was in Australia for 10 years. So I was always being sent away from West Wales. I loved West Wales. West Wales is my happy place, it's my heaven. I love the place, I love the atmosphere, the culture, the people, the countryside. It set in my heart an enormous longing to get home. And I remember thinking I never would. I remember in Australia, I got married, I had kids. I remember thinking to myself, I'm never going to get back. I'm 25, I've got kids, I'll never get back. But kind of life took over, and through a long, long series of extraordinary coincidences and traumas and stuff, 2 years ago, age 70, I actually got back here full time rather than holiday visits. Bought a house in Llandudno and just fulfilled all my dreams. I'm just so totally delighted to be back in this incredible part of the world. The only problem is, it seems like a lot of people are discovering this is heaven on earth, and it's getting a bit busy now compared to what it was. So there's some tattered edges to the dream. But yeah, this is my favourite place in the whole world. The air is like spring water straight off the Atlantic. The weather is incredibly entertaining. You never know what you're going to get next. In Australia, they didn't have weather. They just had climate, warm and hot every day. You never know what's coming around the corner in West Wales. We'll listen to it. It's incredible.
Child?
Really, it's a simple answer to me. It's always going to be the blackbird. A lot of people don't know. So let's say this. A lot of people don't know. The blackbird only sings from kind of now, beginning of March, end of Feb, until probably late June. And if you know that, when they start singing again in spring, like now, it's an enormously joyful moment when you hear the first blackbird. Most people know this, but I'm amazed how many people are oblivious to the blackbird. And it's the most, to me, it's like Strings of Pearls, Jules, their most incredible song. I just heard one. The problem is it gets me up too early because when I hear it, what's the gland that it's meant to activate? The pituitary, is it? There's this theory that that nature and animals and plants are stimulated into action by sound. And so when we as humans hear the first blackbird call, it makes changes in our body, which is like our process of transition from winter into spring and summer. And it's happening now for me because if I hear it in the morning, I'm out of bed. I was out at 6 o'clock. I never get out at 6 o'clock. I was out of bed and on my bike at 6 o'clock the other morning, hoping that I'd hear more blackbirds. They do rehearse because they have what they call the undersong. The blackbird undersong is a beautiful thing because you can occasionally hear it. You might be walking down a lane and you'll hear this really, really quiet version, and it's a little blackbird and he's sitting in a hedge, and they'll go, only just hear it. And apparently, well, I think, or I've read, or maybe I made it up, that's rehearsing. And when they get fairly good, then they go. Unlike the thrush, who always repeats 3 times. Not such a great bird. I don't want to be a thrush. The thrush goes 3 times.
Do you think these birds have regional accents?
They definitely learn, don't they, from their environment, because they do pick up phone call sounds, mobile phone call sounds. I don't know. I haven't heard a blackbird saying "morning, everybody." I don't think so. I mean, when you listen to them, you'd have to be really subtle. You have to be really sensitive to pick up those subtleties, and I'm not. But what I have noticed with the blackbird, did you hear one? No. The interesting about the blackbird, though, is we talk about the blackbird singing. They don't sing. They converse. So they don't go like what we would call singing. We go. They may have little snatches of what we would call song, but mainly it's like they're talking. They go. Do you know what I mean? Isn't that true? I was talking to someone kind of about this the other day, and what I was saying is that kindling and fire is happening already, because there is just the most brilliant parenting going on around the place. And it makes me feel very optimistic. And I was telling this parent how in the 50s, what people don't know now, because they're just being parents and they think they're doing a shit job, as all parents do. I was just saying, God, you have no idea what a great job you're doing, because like when I was growing up, you were always hearing kids crying. If you went down the main street, the kids were crying. Kids were being slapped, could be shouted at. You go to the shop and it was just so harsh. And now God, the commitment of parents these days, way beyond even what Fee and I managed, where there is such care and attention to the detail of their upbringing. There's so much love and so much acceptance, so much desire for them to be free, to have their own opinions, not to be limited by their gender, not to be limited by self-criticism, low self-esteem. It's just brilliant. I can't believe how wonderful these kids are. And they're self-opinionated in the most wonderful, creative ways. They say brilliant things to you. And to me, it's almost like, I wonder if it's the first time in the history of humanity there's been this great big raft of kids coming into our universe, into our world, who have basically got what they need as children. And what will the impact of this? It's been happening now for about 15 years, I think. what will be the impact of these kids on our world? I think it's going to be incredible. So for me, I don't have grandchildren, but I have fairy grandchildren of whom I'm incredibly proud, and I try and keep this idea in mind. Learning from their parents is support their self-esteem, support their sense of entitlement without making them omnipotent, and support their gender identification, get them to be whole, support them in being whole. And in 7 years' time, all will be well. Is that 7?